thanks for joining us here today. We've got Joel Nelson along, a good friend of mine that we've worked together for a number of years in the fishing, outdoors, photography, hangout industry. We've done a lot of stuff together, and Joel's a guy that, though he wouldn't fancy himself a professional photographer, has been known to take some nice photos in his day. And even better than his photos, Joel, you are a storyteller. I mean, you do a ton of writing for a lot of publications, a lot of online stuff for your own service for a lot of brands. So your ability to tell stories, I think, was one of the things that I thought would be great to have you here to tell some stories. We'll spin some yarns, we'll show some photos, but I appreciate you coming on today.
No, it's a neat opportunity. Yeah, for those of you that don't know, that maybe know a little bit about me, might not know that I work with Matt a lot. Matt is my photographer person. He's who I call when I need a really great shot. And it's lucky that we live just up the road from one another, huh, Matt?
Yeah, this is good. And it worked out well to kind of test drive this 1,000 words project that I kind of been kicking around. You were gracious enough to take a little time. You're in your Yeti fish house. I know you wish you were probably on Mille Lacs, but probably not enough ice yet. But the fish aren't biting in the driveway, I would assume.
No, it's funny. The fish aren't biting in the driveway, but this is like the prep that goes into it. I was just here, just adding bedding to the bunks and going through the cabinets and making sure I have what I need, because probably won't be long, and that will be upon us.
Yeah, we've had some good times on the ice and catching some fish, and geez, we've had our kids out eating pizza and fishing and watching movies. And Yeti has been one of those brands that both you and I have had the pleasure of working with, and hopefully will in the future. But they make a nice product, and they make a nice studio for you there.
Exactly.
So Joel's worked in the outdoors industry for a long time, for his whole career, really, and hunting and fishing, and kind of made your name for yourself in the fishing industry. But I know you worked out in Yellowstone, and you've had a ton of adventures all over North America. But you grew up here in southern Minnesota, fishing the creeks and turkey hunting the ridges. And I think you got a couple of photos that are going to kind of play off of maybe some of the backstory with fishing. So we're going to pull up this first photo that I know there's a great story behind this. This won't be the probably the highest quality photo that we ever show on this project, but I know there's a great story to go with this. So tell us about what we got going with this photo.
Well, this is who doesn't love an old timey black and white shot, right? This is, for me, kind of when I trace back who I am and what I do, not just in the fishing industry, but who I am as a person. A lot of it comes back to this. This is Grandpa. This is Grandpa's hands, showing off some incredible bluegills, the likes of which aren't around very much today, especially fish like that. And it's hard to explain to those that don't bluegill fish, but to get a bluegill that you can lip with your thumb is pretty legendary. That's a big fish. But to get a bluegill that my grandpa could thumb was even crazier, because he was a farmer, grew up over by New Prague, Minnesota, ran pigs, cattle, the thrashing machine, and did the cropping side of things too. And his hands were like 2x10s. I mean, every finger was fat and flat, as you could imagine. So those are 1 pound, maybe up to 2 pound bluegills, and really brings me back to my childhood and fishing for bluegills, and him teaching us and showing off what was around in the 30s and 40s. I believe it was from the Alexandria area, possibly Lake Osakis. My grandpa headed up to, even back then, people traveled to fish, and kind of serves up a historical marker for, who I became and helped to, and how I helped to, how my grandpa helped shape some of that along the way.
Yeah. You didn't mention it, but your family then, had the farm here, south of Cannon Falls. Tell me more about your childhood then, up and down the creeks and exploring the ponds and and stuff. I know your dad was busy farming, which, you know, farmers a lot of times aren't able to hunt and fish as much as they might like. But what was your childhood like then with that image of, you know, grandpa with those big fish? Tell us a little more about that.
Yeah. You brought up creeks and whatnot, and you know, around here they're cricks, right? And there's a Greg Brown line from a song, casting crappie flies for chubs and such. And that's really what we did is, man, any kind of jig or whatever lure we could get our hands on that was small enough, we just went up and down the creek and caught creek chubs. And when you get older, it's like, well, now there's trout. And maybe if you were good enough, you could catch a trout. But interspersed with all that was my grandpa in New Prague, where there's not many cricks and there's more lakes, taking us out to Cedar Lake and French Lake and all these southern Minnesota lakes that I grew up fishing and catching bluegills. So between home on the cricks and catching chubs and eventually trout, and then all the pan fishing I did back then, that was kind of the basis for my childhood adventures. It really was.
That's cool. When you talked about crick versus creek, it made me think of the Patrick McManus reference. Where I think it's a creek unless it has, if there's an old spare tire dumped in it anywhere, it immediately becomes then a crick. So from my experience around here, yeah, I totally agree. I think there probably are more cricks than creeks, but still
Right.
nonetheless. And now you're able to, I mean, obviously you've turned this over now to your boys. You know, it's been fun to see photos and really to be out with you guys and see their kind of love and passion for fishing, much like you had growing up.
Yeah, they've been, kind of dyed in the wool with it too. And it's funny, I was not a very good sportsman father when they were younger, because not only was I fishing a lot and doing stuff for the industry, but when we did fish, I put a lot of pressure on myself to be the best dad, to give them the best fishing experience ever. And that was just too intense. And now it's funny, as teenagers, they've come back to it in a huge way. And now they're ready for some of that. And so I thought I had horribly screwed it up, but some of it stuck, and now they're back for more.
That's awesome. And like you said, you've been busy in the industry that whole time, but great to know that through that your boys were seeing something in them that inspired them. And like I said, I think about Isaac now and his adventures in Instagram and how the world has changed, where your grandpa's got this old crusty old photo of, these two, but now your boys and our kids and us for that matter, we live in this Instagram world where that you're still standing on the bank and it's hit the Instagram story that I caught this fish or this happened, and how times have changed, but a lot has still stayed the same.
Yeah, you're right. The Instagram side of things and what we do, showing off the photos. You never wanted to show off a photo before, unless it was of something you caught and they couldn't pin you down to where you were. And nowadays, sharing the photo is a big deal. In fact, my youngest son, Micah, actually dropped a cell phone in the creek this fall, trying to get the perfect picture. So that just tells you how far we've come in that amount of years.
Yeah, that's good stuff. Well, I'm going to hop in and just share my short little story. And then I know we're going to circle back to another one of your images. The story, as Joel talks fishing, I wanted to at least have some sort of a fishing spin on mine. And mine goes back to in August here, a number of years ago, that I had some buddies that were doing a fly-in up in Canada. They went up early. I had a commitment and left home, I think at 9 p.m., drove all the way up to International Falls, slept in my truck, got up the next morning, and the guy was, the outfitter was going to fly me in. We had about a 2.5 hour flight north of Fort Francis. Woke up, threw my stuff in the Beaver, and then the weather really turned. And so he said, we're going to have to wait. And I thought, God, did I just drive through the night to not be able to get up there? And so I fell asleep on his couch in his office. And then a couple hours later, he shakes me, he goes, we got a window, let's go. And we hopped in the plane and we flew up, and we got about 2 hours into the flight. And, we're watching the GPS, and there's this bank of clouds, just black as night. And we got to the lake that we were going to fish on, or that he was going to drop me off. and he did he banked and did a 180 off of that tower of clouds. We went back to the outfitter, so 2 hours back. And I thought, I was kind of thinking I'm going to pack things up, and waited about another 90 minutes. And he goes, let's do it again. Got back in the plane and flew up there. And we flew like right over the trees the whole way in. It was kind of crazy because the weather was still sketchy. And finally came into the lake, and it was raining hard. And he came in low, got me to the dock, and literally like threw the door open, shoved me out. I don't even know that he even stopped the plane, and he took off. So the adventure of getting to this lake was several hours and back and forth, and the weather adventure. But the images were, you get that far off into the middle of nowhere, and it's like you've experienced many times. It's quiet. It's as remote as you can ever imagine. And this particular image, just to set up a couple of these moving forward, it was the first night or the second night. It was sitting around the campfire and telling stories. And I remember looking out at the water, and the water was glassy, and I had this, kind of my eyes, are they playing tricks on me, or what am I seeing? Is the water moving? And happened to look up, and the northern lights were just going crazy in the sky. And everybody was, watching, and they were just dancing, as, if you've ever been lucky enough to see it. So, the photographer and me, okay, now I'm scrambling. I got to get gear, and I want to get this shot and I want to get that, and ended up getting a few shots. But the one that I wanted going into the trip was one where I wanted myself in it, and I wanted the stars, and I wanted some northern lights, and I wanted kind of this headlamp shot. So I quick set up the tripod, and the northern lights, I would say, were waning at this point. They were still there, but not quite as intense. And it was the classic timer shot. And fortunately, I had kind of tested things out, and the image that I got was sufficient. It wasn't perfect because the northern lights were maybe waning a little bit, but it was still this awesome purples, and you could see the stars, and to have the headlamp kind of shining off into the night.
It's gorgeous.
There was just some sort of little story there that kind of went with it, with, the metaphorical, off into the wild unknown and stuff. So those were kind of the sequence. But like so many images, it was all of the supplementary stuff, and the tangents of the travel, and the driving through the night, and the flying into the storm. And not only that, but it was sitting around the campfire with a bunch of buddies that was really special too, which you and I have been able to share, and hopefully will in the future. And really was a big part of me even wanting to start this project, was kind of this, just telling stories and kind of sitting around. At this point, we're on Zoom. It's the virtual campfire, but there's just something about being able to kind of reminisce and tell stories and ask questions and kind of relive those things with each other. So that was my quick story. But why don't you jump in and tell us about this next photo, which the quality looks a little better. I'm not going to talk much about the quality because I'm kind of embarrassed that I might have been on one end of it, but go ahead.
No, the quality is great, Matt. Just like all the photos you take. I tell you, it's interesting to me. I chose the old timey sunfish photo or bluegill photo from my grandpa. And then you talked about, obviously the adventures as we've gotten older. I know you grew up in very similar circumstances where you're probably fishing for bluegills and crappies as you were younger, and then eventually walleyes. And now we can roam. And you and I have, like you said, both shared several camps in the border regions of Canada and northern Minnesota. And, this is interesting to me as we look at this photo because, it still harkens back to me in some respects doing what I've always done, which is fish for panfish, and still love. So who doesn't love the idea of a fly-in remote fishing vacation? I'm all about it. But this is a cool segue to come back to the fact that we still fish where we're at and fish for what's available where we're at. And that's from a lake, within an hour of where we live, and beautiful bluegill. And it just goes to show that, with some conservation and with careful catch and release, selective harvest, a fish like that, fish from my grandpa's era, may still be realized if we're careful by my kids and your kids. And like you said, there's so many stories that come up from a photo that, when you behind the lens or me on the other side of it can remember it. People just see the photo, but the stories behind them and how we feel about them, to your point about this project, that's what really hits home for me.
Yeah. And, I remember taking that photo too. And, a lot of times when you and I are doing what we do, it's the goal is the photo, or having some content at the end of it, which, working with the clients that I do, and I'm lucky enough that in a lot of ways that's, what my job is. But that was one of those nights where, man, the light got magical and the sunset and and the fish started biting, and it was glass and I was fishing and you were fishing and the camera was sitting there. But like you said, with the conservation part of it, it was not about, hey, we got to get a fish for a picture. And the other part of it, it was not about, let's keep hammering and throwing another one in the basket and just, start stacking these fish on top of each other. And that was the awesome part that you're talking about with conservation too. And a fish like a bluegill that, a lot of times we just think, it's a kid fish and just, whatever, let them catch whatever they want and whatever. But they're such a beautiful fish and they're unique. And the fact that I think that image shows the release part of it too, which catch and release, you don't think much about that with bluegills, but like you said, if you can continue to build that, that future for our kids with fish like that and others.
And that fish is as old as some of our kids. I mean, that's the cool part. That's a 10, 11, 12-year-old bluegill. It's a big representative of its species. And, like you said, it was kind of magical that night, remembering we kind of crept into this back bay and made some casts as the light was just getting candy. We had some cloud cover come in behind that just painted it up all kinds of neat colors behind us. And it felt more like we were in church. It felt almost cathedral-like, and we're in here and, we're the ones that aren't supposed to be there, but we're just enjoying what it's giving us, putting it back and respecting, that evening and respecting that fish. And, it was a treat. And those are the things that obviously you don't hear when you just see the image. Right.
Right. And I think, thinking back to that too, when you sent that one over, that was one that you wanted to talk about, it really just got my wheels turning about what that night was like. And we kind of crept up in there, and it really was not that frantic photo shoot feel. It was sort of like, hey, we're at the end of this, let's take what we can get. And it was magical. It was cathedral-like, it was quiet. It was, to catch a few fish was awesome. And to put them back, it was great. And it was kind of one of those that I hope the image has served you well with things, but that certainly became, secondary in the goal of, or in the memories of what that night was.
Absolutely. Yeah. And that's the cool part. I'll remember it for what that was, not that it served a purpose necessarily for a sponsor or anything like that, or that we were out there doing a photo shoot. I'll remember it for that evening and how cool it was.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, hey, I really appreciate you being willing to come on and tell some stories. We'll certainly, we'll do this again, I'm sure. I know, like I said, because what you do is telling stories, a lot through your writing and your public appearances and the places that you go, you're able to tell great stories. And I know the people that hopefully will eventually tune in to these episodes and this project will enjoy hearing you talk about, Grandpa's hands and the future of bluegill fishing and conservation and our kids. And I think in a short time here, we were able to kind of wrap on a lot of different stuff, which I appreciate. And I hopefully, anybody that will watch this or listen to it will be able to appreciate too. So thanks a lot for coming on.
It's been fun. Thanks for having me. Can't wait to do it again. Thanks, Matt.
Awesome. Take care.